here. We'll wait a few minutes, see who else shows up.
Mrs. Oman, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
It's not letting me join on my iPad like it was yesterday.
Give me a second. There we go. You mean like for another class?
Yeah, I joined yesterday for Miss Cross's class, but it's not letting me join for your class. Like, it won't pop up.
Was she using Google also?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I'm kind of new to this. David is here. Mackenzie is here. Sydney has joined us. There she goes. Ready. Check this out. Spreadsheet. So. We'll get started in a couple of minutes.
Mrs. Zelma, is it okay if I send you my homework after this is over?
You mean the work that was due today?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fine. As long as I get it by 3:30, it's fine.
Okay.
I haven't sent you anything because you said that we could turn it in at once, like all at once we came to school. Is that still fine, or do you want me to go ahead and send it?
It'd be better if you send it. If you'd rather submit it on paper, I know the school's supposed to have a drop-off service
Yeah, that's
tomorrow.
what I was going to do tomorrow when I pick up my other work.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to be at the school tomorrow. I just had other stuff going on today. And since, they're letting us do this from home, I figure, staying at home will work out today.
All right.
They're also going to have the new packets waiting for you. They're going to be on blue paper, so don't mix them up with the original stuff. Most of the teachers have it on blue paper.
Okay.
Mr. Salmon,
Go for it.
I have the Google Drive thingy, the files, and do I have to resubmit again? Because the homework that's due today, I did it, but do I have to resend it again, or will you look at it?
I've printed off everything I got. Jocelyn, yeah, the only thing I don't have from you is what's due today.
And yeah, so, I finished it yesterday. Do I have to resend it again, the whole file?
Let me look and see what you sent me, because yesterday I'm looking, and Jocelyn, the last thing I got from you was on March 22nd.
Okay.
So, yeah, I see you got a folder. Let me look. Give me a second. I'm waiting for it to pull up. Oh, I see what you did. So you're just updating your work in your folder.
Yeah.
Yeah, just email me each time you put something new in there. That way I know to go back and look at it.
Okay.
And now I'm set. All right. So we're up to, go ahead.
I think I figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, oh my gosh. I think I figured it out, so I'm going to join on my iPad. So if it says I leave, that's why.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, as long as I see you come back, you're good.
All right.
So it says I got 16 people up in here. A lot of them are all just hanging out on silent mode. They're all on silent mode. That's not good. Oh, well. So pretty much like last time, the game plan is basically, we got, the good news is there's less notes to go over. But pretty much I took 9.1, broke it in half since there were 5 historical developments. I was trying not to make you do, a whole bunch of stuff all at the same time. But that's pretty much what we got. We got advances in technology and exchange is pretty much what we have. So anything you guys read that you want to go over?
The nuclear fission part
Okay.
from the what?
Right. So I'm looking. Let's see. Yeah, energy technologies, including petroleum, nuclear power. So basically, World War II, all the major powers were researching nuclear weapons. They were all either developing them or in the process of developing them during the war. And it wasn't just nuclear power. You had a lot of technology come out of World War II. You had, computers were pretty much invented during World War II. You have like the big, huge airplanes that come out of World War II, after the war, a lot of those things are fitted out for civilian use. You have, computers are kind of self-explanatory, but you have, airplanes. This is when you start to have bigger passenger planes that can carry, hundreds of people at a time and go long distances. But with nuclear weapons, they figured out, hey, if we can take the energy in this explosion and if we can control that energy and we can control the reaction, we can make an enormous amount of electricity. And so the United States and then the Soviets really started making nuclear energy facilities in the 1950s. And you get a lot of, you get a lot of bang for your buck. You don't need a lot of raw materials, but it will make an enormous amount of electricity. And the other thing is it doesn't really pollute the air or, the land or anything. The biggest concern as far as pollution goes is the waste. In the last 20 years, they've made the waste a lot more recyclable with technology. The only other thing people are worried about are nuclear accidents like you had in Chernobyl in the 1980s, you had in Japan about 10 or 12 years ago. But, it doesn't happen very often, I guess, so some people see it as a replacement for coal-fired power plants, oil-generating power plants, because coal and oil, of course, create CO2 emissions, contribute to greenhouse gases, climate change, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of people see nuclear energy as an alternative to that. The French get, I think, about 80% of their electricity from nuclear. So that's something that people discuss and talk about.
Mr. Zelman,
Yeah.
there was this part, I think it was on the website, where it said that they stopped using their weapons, like nuclear weapons, and started using them as energy. So like they took them apart and started using the nuclear energy in the weapons for energy.
Yeah, you can take the warheads that have uranium and plutonium in them and use that as a fuel supply in a nuclear reactor at a power plant. So when us and the Russians dismantled a lot of our nuclear weapons in the 90s, that's where a lot of it wound up. Because they use the same stuff, nuclear weapons use uranium and plutonium, so do nuclear reactors and power plants.
So the nuclear stuff, did it start with France?
It didn't start with them. It's just the French, for whatever reason, really got into it. I couldn't really tell you why. I've got some hypotheses. I'm not sure how correct they would be. Part of what it might be is there's a lot of hydroelectric energy in the United States. Like if you go up into the mountains, there's a lot of dams. Like even in North Carolina, there are a lot of dams. There's a big dam in Lexington that makes High Rock Lake. And so a lot of those dams are used to make nuclear, or not nuclear, just electricity. But the side effect of damming up your rivers is it makes these lakes, and some people find the lakes ugly. You wind up drowning the land around it. So this is, like I said, I could be totally wrong. I'm just trying to think and talk at the same time. The French might have said, well, we got, some pretty castles or villages or here that would be destroyed if we dammed up and made hydroelectric. So maybe they didn't do it for that reason. The French I don't think they have as much coal or oil as the Germans do. They have to import a lot more natural resources. So that might have also made those kind of electric plants either less feasible or more expensive to run. I know the French were big into building lots of nuclear weapons in the 50s and 60s. And the French were kind of upset with the United States dominating NATO. And so one of the things that the French president did in the 50s and 60s was he wanted to build up a big nuclear weapons program. And so if you're going to build a nuclear weapons program, you might as well have a nuclear energy program. That might have been what President de Gaulle was thinking. He was president of France at the time.
I know another thing that I read in the reading was about like the population growth in some areas and the decline in growth in some areas. Like
that was part of the homework. So what do you got about it?
I know, like for example, one of the questions for our homework was which countries had the largest population increases over the 5 decades. The main areas pretty much that had the largest increase were like Latin America, Asia, and Africa, and other places like Europe, Western Europe, and like Russia they had a decline in it because of like it said because of like them having richer societies that kind of like lessened like their population growth, and
Right.
in some areas they limited like how many children a person could have or like a family could have.
Well, the only ones that flat made laws against having lots of children were the Chinese. I was hoping you would notice that. I got a lot of assignments where people like listed all these countries, which is fine, but I was hoping that you guys would find patterns, and it's good that you found these patterns. If I think the highest population growths were the red ones, if I'm correct. I don't have the book in front of me. And then there was like orange was like the next highest, and there was yellow and green, and I think blue were the negative ones. But what I was trying to get you to see was a lot of the high growth countries were like I think there was a whole bunch of them in the Middle East, North Africa. I think you mentioned Latin America had a few of them as well. And what I was trying to get you to figure out in the reading, and I think the book mentioned this, is, let me see if I can try to do this real quick. Try to make a chart and show you how this works. Have we gone over birth rates and death rates in the class yet?
We did in Africa.
Like the high birth rates versus high death rates and low versus high. Did I ever do any of that really with you guys?
I don't think so.
No.
Just when we were talking about like the triangle trade and stuff.
Okay. Let me
Like
try
with the staple foods.
Gotcha. Let me try to make up a chart real quick. See if this works. Yeah, so let's see. This is the death rate. And then this is the birth rate. and we're gonna have. Just bear with me. I'm trying to get this all on the fly. So. Shoot, I did that wrong. There we go. So this is third world, first world. Yeah, I can make this work. And then the death rate for the third world drops in the first world. There we go. All right, I think I got it. All right. How well can you guys see this?
I can.
Let me try this.
Kind of.
It kind of cuts off.
Yeah, it's
can
like
you raise it up a little?
Trying to pull up my own window back up. Oh, there we go. I click on it, and
yeah.
there we go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can
that's
see it.
Yeah, we
Okay. Yeah, there we go. I can see it now. I got to look at it sideways to make it work. All right. So what you have is this is kind of like how this is supposed to show you how population growth has gone. Have you guys figured out what I mean by like first world and third world?
First world and third world countries.
Yeah.
Like Africa is like a developing country, so it'd be considered
Correct.
third world.
Yeah, all your developing countries are third world countries. They're usually seen as less wealthy than the first world countries, like the U.S., Japan, Europe.
Britain.
Yeah, almost all of Europe. They're your first world countries. So what you have is in your first world countries, over time, your death rate drops. They drop in both, but they drop at different times. Like your first world death rate is the first death rate to drop. Okay. Anything that you guys have learned over the last couple of months why death rates are going to drop over time?
I know
Because-
life expectancy started getting higher because more vaccines was being created, so no one died at a young age really anymore.
Well, you got a lot less people dying at a young age, so more people are surviving to adulthood, and they're having children of their own, and so your death rate drops, but people aren't used to people dying at a later age. So for a while, what happens is your birth rate's still high in the first world, and so what's happening in between the death rate dropping and the birth rate dropping is you got a rapid population explosion in the first world. Like 100 years ago, Europe's population was booming. North America's population was booming. Japan's population was booming. Okay? But once you get into about like after World War II, the death rate, or not the death rate, the birth rate drops because people are used to the fact that, hey, you know, I was born and all of my brothers and sisters survived. I don't need to have 5 or 6 kids. Plus, in the first world, what do your kids do when they're kids? That's a question to you guys.
Oh.
They're
They were pretty
surviving.
much like taken care of. They kind of just like were some of them were like homeschooled by like having like maids, teachers and stuff like that.
But they're sent to school though, right? Some kind of school. Most
Yeah.
first world countries by 1945 are pretty much sending their kids to school, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, like boarding school.
Any school, like, you know, Lexington Senior High School or Pickett Elementary School.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is they're not working. You know, child labor is gone in the first world, right?
Yeah.
So people are used to the fact that their kids will survive, so they don't need to have a lot of them. And the other problem is is a family that has a lot of kids. They have to take care of these kids. They can't send the kids out to work like you had in the third world, or we had in the first world 100 years ago. So it doesn't make sense. Your birth rate crashes in the first world, and so your population growth is very low. And like you guys were saying in the reading, it's in the negatives now in most of Europe. It doesn't, you have like, let me put this down for a second. This is a little bit driving me nuts. All right. So in Europe, well, in anywhere, any family, any, you guys, have you guys read what it means by like a nuclear family?
It's
Ain't
only
that
the
like a
parents and
mama,
the
a
kids.
daddy, and 2 kids?
Correct. Well, it can be any amount of kids, but that's a nuclear family. It's like the nucleus of an atom, the mom, the dad, the kids, and that's like 90% of the whole family picture. Like, you call your aunts and uncles every now and then, you visit grandma and grandma every now and then, but it's not, you're separated out. It's like your own little tight family. So in a nuclear family, how many kids do you need to keep the population stable?
2.
Exactly. So what that means is in Europe, you don't have that happen. You have, on average, like one family might have 1 kid. The next door's family has 2 kids. So the average of that is 1.5, which means what's going to happen to your population in Europe?
It's going to go down.
Exactly. That's exactly what's happened in Europe, Russia. I think Japan is in a negative population situation. The United States would be in a negative situation if it wasn't for immigration. Native-born Americans who have lived their whole lives here have less than 2 kids per family on average. What you have happen in the third world is the third world, your death rate has dropped. Now, you still have a high death rate. Like their death rate now is like here, and ours is way down here. But it's still lower than what it used to be. And so what's happening in the third world is your population is booming in the third world. And the problem that the third world has is they haven't industrialized as well as the rest of the world has. So they have problems with resources, feeding their people, providing medical supplies. And so, that kind of makes it look bad, the fact that you have a booming population, but it's harder to take care of. That's what a lot of the Green Revolution homework was about too. Is you have this question: as the world's population goes up and up, how are we going to be able to provide for them? And the Green Revolution has a lot to do with that. Energy technology. Oh, since we're talking about population, one of the things it mentioned in the skeleton was wider availability of birth control, and that's something that's seen as a very important reason of declining birth rates in the first world. Women have more access to multiple types of birth control. Also, it's seen as more socially acceptable in the first world, in the developed, in the wealthy countries. A lot of your lesser developed and less wealthy countries, it's more socially frowned upon for women to use birth control. And so, that's part of why women would have more children. Also, there's more of, since there is a social pressure on women in less wealthy countries to have children, a lot of times they'll get married at a younger age. Like if you go back to the early 1900s, it was common for couples to be engaged and married before they were 20 and already having kids. And so if you're having kids at that early of an age and you can have kids for 15 or 20 years, you can physically have more children. Whereas in Europe and North America and Japan now, a lot of women wait to get married until they're in their 30s, won't have children until that time, and so it's physically more difficult to have children. So that's a part in it also. So we got energy technology down, we got fertility rates down, we got 3 bullets left, and anywhere you guys want to go works out.
You still want to be on 9.1 or 9.1 continued?
Either one. I'm flexible. I got both skeletons printed out next to me. We can bounce back and forth however y'all want to do it.
There was like a bunch of vaccines starting to be made, like after the 1900s, because that's what all the links are about. They were able to get the resources in order to make vaccines for really bad diseases.
Yeah, a lot of the 9.1 continued are things that help people live longer. You know, technological inventions, medical inventions. Like we're talking about the Green Revolution. It's easier to grow food where you couldn't grow food before, places that were too dry to grow food. Like a lot of people, go to the store and they say, I don't want GMOs. Have you guys ever heard of GMOs?
Yes, genetically modified.
Yeah, so like, a lot of foods, will brag that they're non-GMO foods. And what a GMO food is it's been genetically modified, and it can be in any kind of way at all. It can be like, you got a vine as long as your arm, and it used to grow 2 ears of corn and now it can grow 4. That would be a GMO. But part of the reason you have GMO foods isn't just for the farming corporations to make money. That's part of it, but that's not all of it. It supports the larger population that the world has. If there was no such thing as GMO food, you would not be able to feed 7.5 billion people across the world. 100 years ago, there was only 2 or 3 billion people. 100 years before that, there was less than 1 billion. So the problem is, how are we going to feed all these people? GMOs make that possible. You also are able to grow more food in the same space. So like if you have an acre of farmland, you could grow 2 or 4 times as much food as you could 50 or 100 years ago. So that's kind of what the Green Revolution's about. Better irrigation, better crops that are resistant to drought, resistant to disease, resistant to pests, all that kind of thing. So that helps people live longer. And then the medical innovations like Haley was talking about. Do you guys kind of know, like, you guys were reading, if you haven't read already, in earlier classes or just common or, prior knowledge, how vaccines actually work?
It implants
The disease in your body.
Well, you take either a dead version of whatever disease it is or a weakened version of whatever disease it is, and you inject that into somebody, and then their immune system reacts to it. And after they're done attacking whatever was injected, your body creates antibodies. Like for smallpox before the vaccine, before they made vaccines, some person has smallpox, measles, chicken pox. Like I had chicken pox when I was 10 years old. You get the disease, you survive the disease, and then your body has antibodies floating around in its bloodstream for the rest of your life. And so if somebody with, like it's 1750, and somebody, 1750, put 1780, and somebody with smallpox coughs up a bunch of nasty stuff on George Washington. George Washington, he doesn't care because he already had smallpox. He's got the antibodies that protect him. Vaccines work the same way. It's just that instead of naturally getting it and getting sick and risking death, you have it artificially, but you're protected by the same antibodies, so you can't get it. So that's one of the things they're trying to come up with now with this whole coronavirus thing. Because if you can come up with a vaccine for coronavirus and inject everybody with it, then nobody can get it. You guys know what the difference is between that and antibiotics, though?
What? They
Are
kill.
antibiotics? What?
They kill all the bacteria.
It focuses on the bacteria, so it's more effective on a bacterial infection, which means it won't attack what type of illnesses?
Viruses?
Correct. Any type of virus won't be affected by an antibiotic. So like some people are like, well, why can't they come up with an antibiotic for the coronavirus? They can't, because coronavirus by definition can't be attacked by an antibiotic. Like, for example, like strep throat is a bacterial infection. So that's why strep throat can be treated with antibiotics. Like penicillin was designed for that purpose. Like I've got strep throat and I've been prescribed penicillin, and I'm sure some of you guys have also. There's a danger with not penicillin, but like there's a danger with all antibiotics. A lot of doctors are starting to get worried about it. Have any of you guys read about that or heard about that or know what I'm talking about?
Like, does it kill like the good bacteria?
That's part of it. That's a short-term problem. That's why a lot of times when people are on those, they'll take probiotics, so their whole digestive system's not all out of whack. But there's a longer-term problem that doctors are worried about. Does anybody know what that is?
Is it kind of like how people like they're starting to think about how like the more and more like they'll eventually like be immune to those antibiotics and they'll. Or am I tripping? Am I just talking?
No, you got it right. Yeah, that's what I was seeing if anybody heard about. Because bacteria is life. And life evolves and life adapts. It takes longer for us to do that because we live 80 years, and so each generation has that long time frame. The bacteria is born, it lives, it dies in a day, and so you're dealing with generations upon generations of bacteria that can adapt, evolve to antibiotics. And you've had penicillin now for around 100 years. And so you can imagine that's like thousands, if not millions of generations that bacteria has had to evolve to penicillin. And so what some doctors are worried about is the more you use a specific antibiotic, the faster that bacteria will adapt to it, and eventually that antibiotic will no longer be effective. You'll have to come up with a new antibiotic to treat the evolved bacteria, if that makes sense. Any other of this innovation stuff? Organs, transplants, cancer treatments, medical scans, all of these things that make people live longer.
I know it talked about like some artificial organs aren't for like long term like use. They're just there for like when the actual organ heals.
Yeah, it's more like a bridge. It's like you have somebody whose heart, for example, is going bad. They know this person needs a heart transplant. And if this person doesn't get a heart transplant, like let's say in 6 months, they're going to be dead. And so they put them on the transplant list, and but they got to wait for somebody to die who matches their blood type and all these other things, to give them a heart. And so if they don't get a heart in 6 months, they're going to die. What are they going to do? And so they've come up with a lot of artificial organs, and hearts are probably the most well known, where they will, do surgery, put an artificial heart in that person, and it won't last for very long. Like the longest I think they'll last is a few years. I think 3 or 5 is the longest any of them have lasted, because it's just it's a machine. Machines break down. Machines aren't designed to do this, and deal with all this blood coming in and out in literally 4 different directions, 24/7, 365. And so what it does is it buys time. It buys time. So if somebody who does match dies, you've given that person, 1, 2, 3 more years to get a match, so they can put a real heart in and keep them alive. That's kind of where the technology is at with it now. Anything else with the medical stuff?
Is radiation and like chemotherapy like trying to basically have like the same outcome?
There are different methods of treating cancer. Chemotherapy, like it, I didn't know what it was for a long time until like I knew somebody who had to have it, and basically, it's chemical therapy is a way to think of it. So you're using chemicals to treat the cancer, and it's not ideal. This is why people who are under cancer treatments have all these awful side effects, because you're literally giving them poison. Radiation is poison. Chemotherapy is poison. But the alternative is the person dies. So chemotherapy and radiation are used specifically, focused on specific parts of the body that are already not functioning because of the cancer. So you kill the cancer cells, and yes, you'll kill some of the other cells around it that aren't cancerous, but the alternative is the person dies. And so it's better than it used to be. It's more effective than it used to be. But at the end of the day, that's what chemotherapy and radiation are. Chemotherapy is chemical based. Radiation, you're using the radioactive elements that you would use in a nuclear plant, for example, but you are shooting them kind of like a laser beam at somebody and firing radioactive particles at the person's cancer cells, because if you're exposed to radiation, you die. So the idea is, if we can focus that on the specific cancerous cells, we can kill those cancer cells and save the body. So that's the idea behind both radiation and chemo. A lot of times, a person with cancer is treated with both, because it's the idea like, one might be more effective than the other. Like sometimes, I'll have a headache, it's a weird comparison, but it's the only one I can think of. Like sometimes I'll have a headache, and if I take Tylenol, the headache's still there. But if I take Advil, it goes away. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll take one of each, and I'll know one of them will work, and the other one, won't do anything bad to me, so I'll just take both, and I know one of them will work. Sounds like a vacuum. Anything else about the medical stuff?
Quick question: are CAT scans and MRI scans basically the same thing? Like they both take pictures like of the body?
You guys know the earliest medical scan you had were X-rays, which is a
Yeah.
form of radiation. Like if you've had X-rays, they'll put like lead suits on parts of your body because they want to limit the amount of radiation you're exposed to. CAT scans, from what I understand, are like a more intense version of an X-ray, and so they can take 3D images with a CAT scan. An MRI is physically different from a CAT scan. An MRI uses magnets and electricity to get an even more higher resolution picture. An MRI is like the most high resolution scan that there is. They can, take pictures of the insides of your body and see all the little details and everything. It's kind of like an ultrasound, but it's like more so, if that makes any sense. Like a lot of you guys who have little brothers and sisters, you might have seen, an ultrasound of them while your mom was pregnant or something like that. An MRI is kind of like that, but it's even more, highly detailed than that. An MRI is kind of like the gold standard of scans, if that means anything. Anything else with the medical stuff? If not, the only thing we got left is communication and transportation.
I know with not the communication, the transportation earlier, like you had said, some of them were like airplanes to like transport things from like one country to another is like what they did with those.
Yeah, well, air transport becomes easier after World War II because of the bigger airplanes, like we were talking about. It becomes more widespread as air transport becomes cheaper around 1980 or so. Like 1980 is when FedEx started, thereabouts. Like you can look up on YouTube like old FedEx commercials from like the 70s and 80s. And basically, it's this idea where you can take a big airplane, load it up with cargo pallets, and you can fly anywhere in the world in less than 24 hours. So if you need something somewhere fast, it can be done and not cost an arm and a leg with air travel. But most of the stuff you buy doesn't get to you by air because, like, I'm trying to think. Have any of you guys that are online with me, have any of you guys like taken a plane outside the country ever?
I have. I've gone to Mexico.
You have? Who has?
Me,
Who?
David.
Oh, okay. It's not flicking back and forth to you. I'm trying to figure it out. Where'd you go, David?
I went to Mexico.
Okay, and you flew to Mexico?
Yeah.
Did you figure out how much it cost to get down there?
Nope. Not really.
Gotcha. Most places in Europe, on an average flight, average time of the year, it's about $1,000 a person to go to Europe. Okay, so you're taking a 200-pound person, a 100-pound person, their bags, you're putting them on a jet, you're flying them across 8 hours and coming back with them, right? So that's what, 500 each way, if I want to be fair. You guys following along with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I want to take something half of my size, no bags, I want to go one way. Now it's $250, right?
Yeah.
Okay. If I want to take something that's like, I don't know, the size of a laptop, okay, now we're like a quarter of that size. So we got something that's like on a 10-pound box, maybe on a, so that's going to cost me like $150, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you send everything by plane that way, it's going to cost $150 to ship it there. A lot of people aren't going to want to pay that much more for a laptop, and I mean, even an iPhone is going to cost more by air. The most efficient way, and this is how, like, I would guess at least 80, maybe 90% of the stuff that you buy comes to the US, is not by plane, but by ship. Okay. Have you guys seen like a shipping container ship?
The one that has like crates and stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to find a picture of one and present it to you guys just so you can see what I'm talking about.
Wait, is
Yeah,
it the one like in Madagascar?
I haven't seen Madagascar, so I couldn't tell you. Give me a second. There we go. I'm gonna present my screen, share my screen, and you guys see that?
Oh, yes.
That is like the Madagascar.
Yeah, that's a container ship. And like each one of those little rectangles on top of the ship is like one of the trailers that you pass going down I-85. So,
Isn't that dangerous?
I'm sorry?
Like dangerous?
Like to have that many containers on one ship?
Yes, won't that float? Like, won't it sink?
Not if you build the ship right. So, but that's how most of your stuff comes into the U.S. is on those big container ships. They don't move very fast. I mean, it takes them like 2-3 weeks to cross the ocean. But since you can pack so much stuff onto one of these ships, the price is cheaper. And so that's the preferred way of doing business in the 21st century, or using these container ships. If it's got to be there quickly, like, perishable medicine or perishable meat, anything that can spoil, then you use air. But if it's stuff that doesn't spoil, like electronics, toys, clothes, furniture, anything like that, that's probably going to come on a container ship. We have like these giant networks of trade built on shipping routes and airplane routes, and I'm going to try to find some of those real quick. Oh, that works. So open that in a new tab. There we go. And I'm going to present that. Share my screen. There we go. Y'all see that all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, red are your air routes, and blue are your water routes. The one thing it doesn't show very well is it shows like the wider the blue is, the more ships use those routes. There's another one that does that with air routes that I could find if I had more time. But you guys got to get the idea, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you see your patterns at? Like, where's your heaviest trade?
Like where the triangle trade was.
Yeah.
Somewhat, but do you have a lot of trade going between Africa and North America?
No, it's mainly like in North America, some of Europe,
Okay.
like some of that. Like you have China over there.
You kind of see it where India is.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
big.
there's you see a lot of it going. You see a lot of water travel going around India. You see it's still going through the Straits of Malacca there. That's kind of interesting. Like, that's been there for 500 years and it's still going through there. And then you got the air routes going over India, like you said. You can see the different, where it's split. So that tells you that there is a lot more air traffic to India than there used to be. And like you were saying, a lot of the east coast of Asia that faces the Pacific, there's a lot of trade going across to North America that way. This is why the world freaks out when our economy sucks, because there's so much trade to the United States from all different parts of the world. So if you have less Americans buying stuff because the economy sucks, then that really freaks out all of our trading partners. It's not good for China for the U.S. to have a bad economy. It's not good for Europe for the U.S. to have a bad economy. This is part of the 21st century global society. As everything becomes more connected with each other, none of the pieces of the chain can break, because if any of it does, it's going to have a domino effect on everyone and everything, if that makes sense. Anything else?
The increase in fuel supplies, like oil, coal, and gas.
You've had a lot more of those. Are all fossil fuels, of course. You've had a lot more of those become available in the last 20 or 30 years as technology has improved. It's been easier to get it, oil, coal, and gas, than it has been. I remember when I was in 5th grade, I was reading a book about how the oil supply was going to run out in 30 years. And I was like, oh my God, when I'm 40, there's not going to be any oil left. What are we going to do? And my science teacher's like, well, I guess we're going to have to figure out something else to use. And here it is, 30 years later, and, oil's all over the place. I mean, I was delivering fundraiser cookies to somebody on Winston Road off, by the food line and the McDonald's near the high school. And there was a gas station selling gas for $1.39 a gallon. And that kind of blew me away. We have any of you guys heard of fracking?
No.
Okay. Fracking is one of those new technologies where we're getting oil. Like it used to be, you would dig a hole in the ground, you would drill for oil. The oil would be trapped between 2 layers of rock. And then once you drilled down into that layer, the oil would be under pressure and naturally kind of like explode up onto the surface. You would collect it and you would sell it. Nowadays, most of that oil is gone. So what fracking does is they have figured out that there is oil that is mixed up with porous rock, like sandstone, for example. Sandstone is very porous. So you can have water trapped inside of a stone, or you can have oil trapped inside of a stone. So what fracking does is you drill down to where these porous rocks are at, and then you have the thing like vibrate at high frequencies. And as it does this, the rocks shake, and then all the liquid comes out of the rock, and then you can, suck it up and collect it. So what fracking does is you drill down, you shake the rock, the liquid kind of bubbles up here, and then you suck it out and you pump it. That's kind of what fracking does. And you can do fracking for both oil and natural gas. And so you have a lot of places in a lot of the country where there is fracking going on in the United States right now.
I
Like
remember it was like in
both
Texas.
Trump and Obama and George W. Bush wanted, well, some of them wanted some of them, but they talked a lot about fracking and they talked a lot about energy independence. Like, you know, we can't have the United States be reliant on oil from the Middle East to survive. Because if we got in a war with the Middle East could cut us off and we'd have no way to have the energy we need. So what fracking has done is it has made us, for the first time in 50 years, it's been about 50 years since we've had enough oil to where we don't have to import it. And, you know, in the last couple of years, fracking has gotten so much oil out of the United States that we are no longer importing oil. We actually are able to export oil and natural gas onto the world market. That's part of why the energy prices are low. Usually energy prices are high if the economy is good because people got more money, they're driving more, they don't care that they're spending more for it. Like, for example, 10 years ago, when the economy got good, people had more money, but we weren't fracking for oil yet. Gas went up to $3.50, $4 a gallon, and people got used to it. But then as we started fracking, the price of oil dropped on the world market because the U.S. was producing more oil, and anytime you have more of any product on a market, the price of that drops. And so, like, when I moved to Lexington and High Point, you know, 5-6 years ago, gas was over $3 a gallon. And, you know, before this whole coronavirus thing hit, it was, you know, about $2.25 a gallon. And that was with a good economy because fracking has increased the production of oil on the world market. Do you guys have any questions about radio, cellular, internet-like communication methods?
Mr. Zelnick, you know how like on the skeleton you said something about satellites?
Yes. So satellites are used for both internet and cellular communication. There's basically a layer of satellites surrounding the Earth that makes both cellular communication and internet connections possible. It's what I mean. It's almost like it's almost like a chicken and an egg kind of thing. You know, cellular technology got better as there were more satellites to support the signal string. Like whenever you use your phone and you call somebody, you know, that signal from your phone goes to the cell tower, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Once it gets to the tower, that tower has to then communicate with a satellite. That satellite will then take it to whatever other tower it has to go to. Like if you're calling somebody in Raleigh, it'll go to the tower, to the satellite. It'll say, okay, they're trying to call 919. Their phone using GPS, which is also satellites, says that the phone's over there in Raleigh. I'll beam it to that tower in that neighborhood in Raleigh, and that'll call the phone. That satellite can do that with any other satellite orbiting the Earth anywhere in the world. So you can call Australia, Outer Mongolia, Britain, the Middle East, anywhere. And those satellites will coordinate all of that.
Okay.
That's why people freak out when there's like solar storms or meteor showers or anything like that, because they're worried that like if any of those things in space take out the satellite network, then all of your cell phone and internet communication is the crapper. It's a lot more fragile than people realize. Anything else? It's almost 2. One of the things I want to mention is I started putting some AP classroom assignments up. I'm going to put some more up over the next few days. You know, not necessarily to be graded, but just some things you guys can practice for. And I also have those office hours at 3 on Tuesdays and Thursdays if you want to take advantage of those.
I have a question.
Go for it.
So besides the questions on the skeleton, are you gonna find like other assignments, I guess, to grade besides that, or?
Like I said, I might do something with the AP classroom stuff. If I do, it'll probably be as extra credit. Jose, were you here last week?
In the call?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I think I mentioned last week that I'm scrapping the research paper, but I'm probably going to use like a Unit 4 test in its place because we're supposed to come back May 18th. And if we do come back, I'm going to have a Unit 4 test ready, and we'll use that in place of the research paper.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else from anybody?
Are you in your room?
I am in my little office I made in my apartment.
You have an office?
Yeah, we got an extra room, and so I made an office up earlier this week.
Are you fancy?
Yeah, I got my World War II airplanes. I got like an old-looking map of the world and some Outer Banks lighthouses. I got my UNC fight banner. I got a globe that lights up if I touch it.
Can you touch it?
And I got a new couch today, right before the lesson on my birthday.
It's your birthday?
It is my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, everybody.
Happy birthday, Mr. Zellman.
Thank you, Ivy.
Wow.
So, Mr. Zellman, are the assignments going to be on Canvas? Those AP assignments?
They're on the AP Classroom website that you guys signed up for and did some practice work earlier on in the year. You should be able to log back into that and use those.
All right.
And while I'm on here, let me check. Aiden has given me work, so he's good. Amy, I'm waiting for work from you. And is Noah still on? Did Noah show up today?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so. He was here last time. I was hoping he'd come back today, but he still owes me work. Those are the only people that I see who either are here or have been here who haven't.
Emailed you my paper.
I'm trying to just get with people who have never given me any work. Like I have people who have given me no work since coronavirus.
Oh, okay, cool. That's cool.
So, and we already talked, so Mackenzie's gonna be on it. I think she's all right. But Mackenzie is gone again. Oh no, she's still here. Anything else from anybody?
No.
All right. I will see you guys at 3 if anybody needs me. You guys can email me any questions you have. Just keep up with the skeletons. The new skeletons run out on the 31st. If you need paper copies, you can go by the school on Friday, or I can email you the copies if you want to do that. Either way is fine. Just let me know, and I'll be able to hook you up with those.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, guys. Y'all take care.
You too. Have a nice birthday.
Bye.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Happy
Bye.
birthday.
Happy birthday.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.